All right, everyone. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. My name is Yash. I am the VP of Logistics here at SACHAX, and today we are joined by Prateik. He's a data engineer at Meta, and we're going to be having a fireside chat today, talking a little bit more about his experiences, his journey as an engineer in corporate America, and just what it means to be someone working in tech today. Um, so yeah, stay tuned. We're going to talk about a lot of different cool things. A lot of insights are going to be shared today. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and let's get into it. Thank you, Pratik, for being here.
Yep, thank you so much for having me. Hey everyone, super excited to be here.
Yeah. So Pratik, for context, SACHAX is our intercollegiate hackathon here at UC Davis. We started in 2018. This is our seventh year being here, and we always like to focus on a variety of projects, not just the particular code. We like to invite design. We like to have some entrepreneurial projects as well. We like to be open to all. That's kind of our motto, and we've also always been launch to something else. We have the space theme, we want to be going to another world, like take the projects to another world. So that is kind of how, we are based. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience and like where in the world have you been? Where are you from? What's your background and what brings you here today?
All right. Hi again, everyone. My name is Prateik. I drove up from San Francisco today, but I currently work as a data engineer in the privacy org at Meta, and just rewinding it all. I grew up in India. I'm hail from the capital city, New Delhi, and I completed my bachelor's in computer science, and post that I was trying to figure out what I should be doing, and I just landed at a startup where I was asked to do pretty much everything. I did from automation to engineering to even hiring at one point. And that was pretty fun. And that's when I kind of like got super interested in analytics, and I decided to pursue my master's in business analytics from Drexel University. So 2016 to 2018, I was in Pennsylvania at Drexel. Then I quickly jumped into network analytics at Comcast, did consulting for 3 years, and been almost 4 years at Meta.
Wow.
Yeah.
Been to a lot of different places, a lot of different career areas. Very exciting. We'll definitely get into all those things. Let's backtrack to, your education days. So, as a kid, what initially drew you towards, I guess, what you did your bachelor's in engineering?
Yeah, so my bachelor's was in computer science.
Okay.
Pretty vanilla. I did, the coding projects. I will say I was not super studious, so I was always kind of like trying to, compete in tournaments. I used to play soccer, football a lot, so I would always be kind of like on the field. But then outside of the field, programming was something which kind of like grew on me a little later during my grad school. What really drew me towards that was just like automating stuff. The day, and I'm a lazy person, the day I realized I can automate stuff, I was like, I'm not gonna write, documents and stuff like that. I just like have a cron job running and it just does it for me. So yeah, that's my first memory.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. From your bachelor's in computer science, what drew you towards data engineering? And can you give a little context of what exactly data engineering is?
Yeah. So once I completed my bachelor's, as I said, I joined a startup. That startup has been acquired now. So back then it was called Maz, and it was into digital media publishing. So I was one of the first freshers that they hired. So I went from writing scripts to automate, Perl scripts to automate like processes on the website. To I said hiring as well. I think that's when I saw everything was kind of like out there for me to explore. That's when I started looking at data sets, and I was like, oh, I'm doing all these automation, but what's the gain? Then I started thinking about how do I measure my work, and that was a pretty basic question I asked myself, and this is again back in 2014, 15. So I didn't really, and the company was super small, so I didn't really know how to go about it, and I just like went for it, did a few things myself, and that's when I realized, okay, if I were to do a master's, I will not I don't think I want to do a computer science master's. I'm more interested in like the data side of things. So that's where Drexel came in, and 2016, 2017, machine learning was the biggest thing back then. And I tried pretty hard to kind of like do all the certifications and make sure I, get there. But I think the more I studied about it, the core problem has always been data governance and data engineering. So machine learning is the sequel to having good data sets. So then that kind of like changed my trajectory a bit. And then data engineering was something that I was super invested in since then.
I see. So you wouldn't quite say that you planned out your, career trajectory. It ended up being the things you were exposed to and the things you found interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I kind of like stumbled upon data engineering. I never planned for it. I planned for several things. None of them panned out. I really wanted to work in New York at one point. Didn't work out. I really wanted to do machine learning or be a machine learning scientist somewhere. Didn't work out. So I kept on stumbling, and there were some detours that I had to take, honestly. I mean, I also, as I said, I worked in consulting. But even in consulting, I was able to kind of like find projects within, data analytics space. And so that's my nonlinear trajectory.
Makes sense. What prompted your switch into consulting from networking?
Yeah, good question. So networking was my first job outside of school. So it wasn't, I wouldn't say that I had too many options back then. I also wanted to kind of like I was really curious to like just dive into the industry. And then once I was in Comcast, I realized that, let me try something else. But then I didn't want to like just limit myself with another industry domain specifically. And consulting back then seemed like an open playing field where I could like find projects from finance, from healthcare, from tech, and whatnot. So I took that plunge, and I'm really glad. I feel like consulting is it really broadens your horizon if you try it out in the initial part of your career. So then that gives you a chance to try out different things and figure it out yourself. Because sometimes you think that you like something, but you don't really know until you do it. And then consulting gave me that lens. And very honestly, I was the most non-traditional consultant because my first client was a tech client. And if you think of a consultant, you think presentations, traveling, and decks and whatnot. But I did none of that because my first client was a tech client, and I just had to dive into data engineering right away. So it's kind of like forced into the deep end.
I see. Interesting. Would you say that through the various projects you worked on, you got a good sense of like what you did and didn't like? And if so, what were some of those things you realized?
Yeah, I think for me personally, when I graduated, as I said, machine learning was the biggest thing back then. And, there were courses on DataCamp, Udemy, and whatnot. You could like just add more skills to your armory. But I realized that I was essentially chasing a domain which required a rigorous amount of industry experience. Unless you were a PhD or something like that, where you could just like dive right in. I think I had more academic knowledge rather than industry knowledge. So that's when I realized that I think the smarter approach for me, which I had to tweak a little bit, was get in there, get on the field, play in the positions you like, and I'm taking a soccer analogy here, but see what you're good at and what you truly like. Because sometimes, and I read it somewhere, I don't know who said it, but you think that you like something and you chase it, but then the reality is you do something and you develop that liking over time because you find that you are good at it and you get better at it. So I think my path was non-traditional like that. So I stumbled upon it like that.
I like that you pointed out that, I guess how you realize that you like things by doing more in them and getting more into it and diving deep. Um, Throughout your various, career areas that you found yourself in, you obviously must have pivoted between a lot of different projects, a lot of different working systems, a lot of new places and work that you find yourself doing. How did you manage to, start all these new things where obviously at first starting anything, you're not good at it and you might not enjoy it? How did you, juggle that with the various switches and trajectory of your career?
Yeah. I think innately I'm a very safe person. So if you ask me to do something, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll do it 2 weeks from now. I'll plan it out. I'll put in the prep time, and I'll do, what it takes. I like planning. But again, my first day as a data engineer, I wasn't a data engineer the day before that, right? And the reason I was hired was because I showed one curiosity to some projects that were live on GitHub, which I was pushing out, and I was like, hey, this is a data governance project that I was working on. So I was showing evidence. And I think when you're starting out, I know, I personally feel like US is a market for experienced engineers or experienced folks. So when you're starting out, you have to be really smart and nimble about how you're presenting your work. I don't think GPA itself would show that. So for me, it was, just showcasing, what my skills are on GitHub, what I can do if I get a data set. And then from there on, the best learning happens when you're pushed to the deep end, honestly, because that's completely out of a comfort zone. And even if you don't deliver on that, you come out of it with a lot of learnings. And I know it sounds philosophical, but trust me, that's the fastest way to learn when you're thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, especially with your what's it called? Getting your first job. You obviously you're not going to have the experience that they want exactly, but it's the qualities that you have to show. If you were to think back to that time, were there any things you wish that you did additionally when you were getting the first job? Maybe some skills you tried to show.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, if I were to look back, the things that I would have done slightly differently is most new grads, in my experience, including me, they underestimate that a large part of the actual industry is people and communication. And at least I used to kind of be overly focused on, I just realized there are people there as well. I just realized, sorry, I was overly focused on just focusing on the technical details of the tools and like what's the new thing in the market and stuff like that. While that is super important because that's your core skill, people management, stakeholder management, documenting stuff, communication is something that is going to take you much further in your career. And I wish I had started out understanding or having that understanding baked in from day one. But that of course, like I figured it out on the fly. And then other than that, curiosity. A lot of times I'm thrown into stuff where I don't have an idea about. How, for example, privacy was not something I was skilled at, but I was kind of like hired into this domain. But then over time, with curiosity and with like good coworkers around you, you develop that domain expertise. It's like chicken and the egg situation. So someone reposes that faith in you, and then you pay it back by delivering on that, and then you pass it forward. So curiosity and communication are the two things I would have probably focused more on.
Makes a lot of sense for sure. I'm sure your curiosity also played into this, but through your career, what would you say helped you grow the most professionally?
Building trust. Uh, I feel like there's a lot of amazing, smart engineers out there, and I trust a lot of future amazing engineers in big tech will come out of this room as well. But one differentiating factor that I have noticed is a company contains engineers across the spectrum. Not everyone is brilliant. And you are dealing with humans at the end of the day. So building trust within your team is super important. You might not be the fastest or the most effective communicator on your team, but as long as you deliver, you work with you put your heart in your work, and you have to actually have fun and like it. Otherwise, you're kind of like dragging yourself. Once you build that trust, then you have that foundation in your team, and you will be trusted with more projects going forward, with promotions, and with other opportunities outside of work. Uh, Building trust, I feel like is super key there.
So show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Show that
Show.
you show what you got. Makes sense. All right, I'm gonna transition a little bit, and from your career trajectory, we'll dive a little bit more into your role right now at Meta. So can you describe, what exactly is your role and what does a typical day look like for you at Meta?
Uh, so as a data engineer at Meta, it can greatly vary depending on the domain that you're part of. Currently, I'm part of the privacy org, and privacy and compliance have really become super critical, I would say, in the last decade or so. So it's kind of new in the industry. My day to day is, uh, I mean, tech stack wise, it's pretty standard. If you think of data engineering, you would think of like SQL, all flavors of it, Hive, Spark, uh, Presto is an internal version that we have, and then coding languages, of course, Python and some other stuff. But it's very stakeholder heavy, the role that I have. We have external regulations that we have to comply with, and those are pretty dynamic. So our deadlines are actually externally imposed. They're not internally imposed. So once we get those, we have to mold those deadlines into chunks of work that we have to deliver. And for example, if someone from Meta were to go out and say that, hey, we are doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm being cautious here, we have to make sure that we are doing that, and we apply and architect a system where we ensure that these things are happening. So it's very externally imposed, heavy stakeholder management. There's 50,000 people at Meta, so there's a lot of humans.
Yeah. Wow, sounds very exciting. Sounds very dynamic of a role as well. Um, Within your tasks, what are some common problems you see arising in your work that you find yourself regularly working to solve?
So privacy poses an evolving engineering challenge because it is newer, and a lot of companies, when they are built, they very rightly so focus on the product first because you need to have a product to show to investors, right? But I think oftentimes what ends up happening is privacy comes in as an afterthought rather than it's bolted on top of the product versus baked into just making a privacy native infrastructure. So I think that is super challenging, and the compliance teams, they don't really care about the engineering architecture or whatnot. They just want to see the evidence that things are going right. You know, so as an engineer, the biggest challenge is always taking those privacy requirements and engineering them in a way which is most efficient, and that privacy is not ending up being an expensive cost center for the company. Because at the end of the day, you could be working on a feature of a product, and helping the company build more products. But uh, designing effective systems ensures reducing the cost of privacy for the company.
Makes sense. And obviously, I'm sure as a data expert, a privacy expert, you have particular opinions about what approach needs to be taken, how privacy needs to be prioritized. And you also did mention a lot of external stakeholders, a lot of external expectations put. How do you balance between what you believe to be the way that, a product needs to be created with regards to privacy versus maybe deferring, demands from your, project managers or your external shareholders?
Yeah, that's a fun question. That's always an ongoing challenge, balancing innovation with compliance. You have to make sure that you're not slowing down the product velocity. You're not sucking away engineering time. So I think that's an ongoing problem that we constantly work on every day. There is, of course, like a framework that we apply. So whenever there is a new product that we kind of like work on, we make sure that the engineering aspects are baked in from day one. And in order to ensure that we're not slowing down the product, we are trying to like incorporate as much AI into the system as possible, buzzword, but that's the reality of it. Like we are trying to make it self-serve, automated as much as possible through every step with human oversight, of course, because at the end of the day, compliance is critical. Uh, So we are doing everything we can, from architectural changes to automating stuff, using AI to ensure that we don't slow the product velocity down.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And in order to, create your products, you definitely need to have a certain toolkit in your, in your skill set. So, what tools and technologies do you find yourself using and are the most useful for you?
I would say for starters, not related to privacy, but just and you're talking about the tech stack and the other tools, right? Okay. As I said, like just SQL is bread and butter when it comes to data engineering. And then on top of that, there are orchestration tools. You may have heard of Airflow. And I'm sure there's like Amazon versions and other company versions of the same kind of like tool. Other than that, there are, there's this Hive Hadoop data warehouse. There's streaming services, Kafka, Scribe. I won't get too much into the tooling because I feel like that's also going to be a little bit of my narrative in my presentation later on, that tooling is fine. It's going to be figured out. And I'm fairly confident with, I don't know how many of you have started playing around with Claude code at this point, but who cares about tooling anymore, honestly? Uh, in the last 2 months, I have written significantly less amount of code myself, and I've basically prompted and architected systems.
Okay, because that was going to be something that I followed up with about AI and Claude and all these LLMs that are entering the workflows now. Obviously, this is something that is disruptive to the industry. How do you find yourself trying to, use these things, but also not fall behind on these things?
I would say that this time around, and I'm not seeing many such landmark moments in the internet, but this time around, this is something very different. This is already changing how people operate on a day-to-day basis. Expectations at companies are changing. You can do 10x work at this time. Uh, the way that I am trying to onboard myself and embrace this change is just doing personal projects at this point. So Claude Code has a free version, but if you guys are super interested, I feel like it's worth it paying for the premium subscription and just seeing the power of it. Building websites which what used to take like, I don't know, depending on the language you're using or a tool you're using, Wix, GoDaddy, and whatnot. Today you can do it writing thousands of lines of code within a few hours. Uh, I think the world is going through this transition together. No one is an expert. The only people who will be gaining from this are people who are going to embrace it as fast as possible. And the only way to do it is just by learning. Just dive into it. You'll figure things out on the way. And I am finding Claude Code very, very useful in my day-to-day, both professionally and personally.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, totally understand the disruptive nature of the AI space as well. Um, so, how important with navigating back to the data engineering and the fact that you work at Meta, how important are cloud systems, pipelines, and data quality ownership?
I think that's the core responsibility of data engineering. Yeah. Data ownership is what data engineering is. And I would even take a step back here and say that as an engineer, you just, whichever part of the stack you are at, you just own that stuff. And I feel like, again, with AI coming in, you can write code in whatever programming language you want. You may not know the syntax, and you can still build stuff end to end, full stack. But specifically for data engineering, data pipelines are just, again, a tooling, but the end product is what we own. No one is going to question why did you do, why did you use X tool versus Y tool, as long as the product is serving well, right? So metrics, insights, and data sets are our core product, and quality assurance on top of that is obviously as critical as it can be. Uh, Sorry, I think I'm trying to get to the root of it, but in my head, I'm just coming back to data sets, and that's what we own.
Makes sense. And then with the data sets, I wanted to address that, yes, you work at Meta. Meta has products, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, that billions of users use. There's so many accounts. There's so many, different components of these apps coming in together at once. The data is obviously at a scale that's maybe some of the biggest scale of any company in the world. So how do you find working with data at this scale, and what does that actually mean when the scale is this large and this significant?
Yeah, I think in simple terms, it just means the smallest architectural decisions can have very significant consequences, right? Today, if you think of it, if you're working on a personal project, deciding whether you want to have a map in your column schema versus, just a string or an array won't necessarily affect your project. And you'll be like, man, I don't care, whatever is the easiest syntax, I'll go with it. But those decisions become super critical, and the efficiency gains that come out of it are enormous when you think about the scale of a big tech company. So I think architectural decisions become super key, which is why a lot of time is in fact spent during the design phase, discussing trade-offs, pros and cons, so that proper design reviews that we conduct with engineers and everyone chimes in. Then there's like multiple phases, and finally when there's like sign-offs, we then kind of like take it to production, again in phases, because production is things can break, you cannot foresee that. So yeah, those design changes initially in the even before writing code, I think are super set you up for success, are the bedrock for the product.
Makes sense. What are some unique challenges in handling sensitive data? With Meta, with all these accounts, you have people, you have important people, you have very high income individuals on these apps. Obviously, the data, some of it can be extremely private and extremely important to hold in a with special care. How have you faced any sort of challenges with regarding the sensitivity of the data?
Yeah, I think in general, again, privacy is an ongoing problem to solve. No one has, one solution for all. Different apps go through kind of like different kind of frameworks. But if I have to really give you an example, and again, I'll cover some of these concepts in my presentation later today. Data annotation is the bedrock of privacy. When I say data annotation, what I essentially mean is if you walk into a doctor's office and you are signing up, you're putting in your information, email, phone number, address. Now that doctor has obvious reasons to use that to provide treatment to you. But then if you are getting ads 1 month later for something and you're like, I don't know where this is coming from, that's essentially privacy leak, right? So data annotation comes into the initial part of engineering where they annotate your email ID, your phone number, and your address with sensitive information or user identifiable information. And that is stored in the privacy infrastructure as information that cannot flow outside of the boundary of this system. It cannot flow through into an ad system. So there's this constant challenge of optimizing for data annotations at several stages within the stack so that you are safeguarding the data at every flow within the system.
Makes sense. As an engineer, how do you balance, usability versus privacy?
Yeah, we kind of touched upon this a bit. Product velocity or usability, I put them in the same category versus privacy. We cannot slow down the product. And we can also not be not compliant. So we have to kind of like do both of those things together. And the way that we have tried to kind of like engineer things around it is identify bottlenecks in the processes and bake in as much automation as possible. The more human intervention that comes into the system, the slower the product gets. So we have created some AI systems, and we're still experimenting with those to create an end-to-end process where human intervention is just required for oversight versus actually going and reviewing forms and big docs and stuff. Uh, Again, like, the tools that we have at our disposal today help us do that and expedite it. But if I were to think of like 2 years back, there were scripts that were helping us doing that. Um, there's a constant tug of war between product velocity and compliance.
Yeah, and you did mention also with, meta level data where there's a lot and it's so sensitive, a lot of the work comes in making proper decisions with the data architecture. Making sure that you are taking into account all the pros and cons. And obviously, these discussions and making these decisions would potentially be one of these bottlenecks that you face in the development process. So how do you, when making these decisions, when there's a lot of different opinions floating around, how do you push through to make something that, in the end, you deliver what you need to deliver?
Sorry, can you rephrase that question?
Yeah, just with all the decisions that come in and the importance of all the decisions that need to be made, obviously there's a lot of conversations to be had, and that itself can be a bottleneck. How do you push through? How do you, prioritize pushing through that?
Right. I think this is a harder one for me to answer because a lot of decisions happen at various levels in the hierarchy. Uh, if I were to like simplify it, it really boils down to what is compliance asking, and can we give them, and it almost comes down to negotiation at a point wherein we are like, okay, this is the data set that we have, these are the metrics that we are tracking. Is this evidence sufficient? So there's a lot of like back and forth because ultimately it's not the product that is going to give us a sign off, it's compliance.
Yeah.
So we have to ensure that we are compliant, and those negotiations, as I said, they happen at other different levels, and I'm not directly involved in it. So that's not something I have great insight, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Maybe at some point in your career, you'll get a little bit more into that. But yeah, I think your work at Meta seems very interesting, very intense, and very impactful as well. I wanted to take a step back and with your experience, ask more about overall industry insights. We'll start with like kind of the stuff that I guess school doesn't teach you. With all of us being college students, we want to get as much industry experience as possible. We want to put ourselves out there, figure out what the world is like. So what is something that students misunderstand about data engineering?
I think the general answer I have here is not just data engineering, but like even engineering. It's students tend to get more tool focused rather than product focused. There's no right or wrong here, honestly, but I feel like the different paths that you can select, you can either select a more academic route or a more product route. Now, an academic route will definitely look more like a research scientist, where you're trying to work with tools, trying to identify better tools, but then that's your goal, to find the best tool to do the job. But when you're working for a product, your goal is slightly shifted. You're not necessarily chasing the best tool. Yes, you want to still use the best tool, but you kind of like draw the line somewhere. And you do want to like measure the product and create something that adds value to a lot of people. So I feel like you got to understand what's your personal goal first, and then based on that, just start running in that direction. So a simple example on a product tool would look like, hey, I'm a product engineer. So what that means is my goal is to make this product better. What would it take to make this product better? Whether it's data engineering, software engineering, or whether it's like just generating insights, I'll do whatever it takes, and I'll be a full stack engineer to make this happen. So my recommendation is don't be super tool focused. Be more, have a more holistic vision of what you want to go after. If academia is the answer, or you want to do research, by all means, try to build the next Claude. But other than that, if product is your focus, try to make sure that you you can provide value at in every layer of the stack.
I see. Yeah, this insight about, product over, I guess, the value of the technology itself is becoming even more prevalent with AI, especially when technologies can be developed like that. So definitely very insightful. With new grads, what are some knowledge gaps that you see when they come into the workforce nowadays, and particularly in your domain?
Well, I think for starters, new grads obviously have like a ramp up period, so every company, is aware of that. Uh, if I were to look at some examples of, any similar experiences that I have had, and I can think of like a couple of new grads that, I oversaw during my time. What really stood out for me is not necessarily the technical expertise, and again, this may sound philosophical. I feel like once you cross a certain technical knowledge bar, what really takes you further is how you drive the product, how you engage with stakeholders. And that is a trait that you can have from day one. You don't need to be an expert doing that. Sure, you won't be experienced doing that, but you can still do that in your college projects. You can still do that in your assignments, in any hackathons that you participate in. As long as you're driving stuff, that is technology can you can pick it up anytime. And with AI, you may not have to write code from scratch in a year's time. I don't know if anyone else, how many hackathon projects here are handwritten, but yeah, so drive and autonomy and ownership is something that I feel like can be exuded from day one.
How do you suggest going about learning these skills?
Just practice. As I said, there's no silver bullet, there's no course. It's a characteristic trait. Some people just have it, some people need to develop that. And as long as you're getting opportunities to practice it in, let's say, your college project or your hackathons, even doing internships, I feel like that's the best place where you can start showcasing it and honing that skill. Because that skill, once noticed, you can get a lot of your way. You can pitch projects. You can ask for specific projects that you're interested in. And if I'm sitting here and I have like 3 spots on my project and I see someone is like super driven about this, I'll be like, it's fine. We'll figure Python out. I don't care. Come join. So it's more about a characteristic trait that you can develop while you're at college itself.
See, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, now I want to ask more about, engineering culture as a whole, like from workplace insights down to school. So, what do you think makes a strong engineering organization?
Wow. Okay. Was not prepared for this one. Strong engineering organization. Uh, Two things that come to mind are, I would say, some level of fearlessness. I feel like innovation happens while you're having fun or you're not scared to kind of like fail. So, and I heard this from a VP a few days back. If you want to innovate, you have a flatter structure. If you want to have more process, you want like a pyramid structure. So, just if I look back at that, if you give every engineer on the team the freedom to go and develop something, then they'll try out a few things. A couple of them will hit home, most of them may not. But I think that's where great products are built, even in hackathons. So I think a good engineering culture is just letting all your players free. Uh, of course, having some time boxes and constraints and doing it smartly so that you know when you want to like withdraw from a certain approach and take a different one. But freedom and just, I guess, safety, making them feel safe that they can go and try and experiment.
Yeah, I think environment is definitely very important to success, and not only the the contentment of the engineers themselves, but also the quality of the product that they end up developing. So for the engineers themselves, down from the organization, what traits do you see that make a successful engineer?
I think one trait that I have noticed in people who I consider, deadly engineers are technical skills, sure, communication and documentation. I feel like a lot of engineers I have seen are really good writers. They document stuff really well. They can influence people with their writing, why they made this engineering choice, and really conveying that well in writing, documenting it, so that it's kind of like publicized and having people chime in and taking feedback on that. So I think these three skills I have seen over the years really stand out to me personally. If you can write very well, if you can write technical concepts and dumb it down so that a 10-year-old can understand, that's that's really powerful. And that really sells well when you're actually, talking to leadership and you have like 2 minutes, if you can explain very well, document very well, and back it up with your technical skills, that is an engineering excellence that I aspire. I've seen a lot.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm not quite happy with that answer because I became an engineer to not have to write and document, but I suppose that's where we're headed. Um, so with your various industry experience, as a professional trying to make it, what surprised you most about working in industry?
From my perspective, when I started, I used to be slightly intimidated by, oh, this person is so seasoned and they have worked in XYZ companies and they write code in C++ and I've only written college projects. So I think I would be intimidated by if I would see a figure who had kind of like done all those things. But I realized that if you start, you have a brain of your own. If you start thinking about it, and if you pitch ideas, everyone, assuming people have good intent, who you're working with, they're going to be very receptive to that. So just making sure that I'm kind of like I have strategies to counter the imposter syndrome that kicks in for most of the people is one line that comes to my mind when I think about it is like we'll figure it out. I just go in there and I'll be like, okay, I know the demons in my head are telling me I won't be able to do this and this is too hard and these people are great, but I'll figure it out. Just taking that first step has helped me so many times and just eases off the tension in the room when I'm like, okay, I have provided value here. I've asked a question and seems like a lot of people had the question, but it was me who mustered up the courage to just ask that in the first place. It just like eases things off and just then I'm on to the next obstacle. Okay, then what's next? I figured the first one out. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, definitely an insightful one there. I think, yeah, a lot of college students can relate to that in the lecture capacity, being, unafraid to ask questions or not being intimidated by what's being presented in front of you, even if it's unfamiliar. So definitely insightful to know that that very much continues into industry. Um, Wrapping up with like our last set of questions, I wanted to ask you, typical job market advice. What is the biggest piece of advice you have for students trying to break into tech today?
I won't talk about technical skills because that's the core kind of like offering at this point. So assuming everyone is doing something to hone that. On top of that, in my grad school, when obviously I did my bachelor's in India, which was culturally a little different, and then when I came here, uh, I realized the importance of attending conferences and events, and just pitching yourself to to people who are kind of like who you meet along the way in working events is has gotten me more referrals and business cards than anything else at this point. I'm not a big fan of just sitting there and online applying for jobs. It may work for some people, and it's not it's not the easiest thing, especially if you're more on the introverted side. But I feel like networking and building an online portfolio and just like pitching yourself, going out there, practicing how to talk about your work, whether it's a college project in less than 2 minutes, that really like sets you up for success. Even when you're working in the industry, you can talk about your projects and have an elevator pitch for that. So I think networking is a big key here. I can tell you from experience, all of my big company interviews came from networking events. None of them came from just online application. Sure, some referrals here and there, but I was able to knock on doors that I could not have done online applications for.
Very insightful to know for sure. Yeah. So back to data. What should students do to prepare for data roles specifically?
My answer would have been slightly different 2 years back. I would have said focusing on a lot of these tools as your bread and butter first, and then like building on the soft skills. Today, I will say that I feel, and a lot of trusted people in the industry who you may watch on YouTube and other forums, it's pretty clear that the definition of an engineer is going to change, right? It's not just, hey, I wrote this SQL and pipeline related stuff. The pace of execution at this point is it's outpacing idea generation. So if I were to like write a product from scratch and I don't know how to code, I can't do that today. So I will say that don't focus on data engineering per se. I would say focus on engineering. And that would just mean like, hey, I want to build a product and I want to solve for how can I make DoorDash orders reach faster? Okay, how do I make that happen? What kind of data would I need for that? What kind of infra would I need for that? So starting from that and focusing on the design first, and then diving into the technical details of what programming to use, what layer of the stack am I in? Am I in the data layer? Then I'll do some data engineering versus like some backend engineering. The best advice that I had got when I was starting out was when you are in grad school or undergrad, just starting out, if you don't, and this is true for most students, if you don't really know what domain or where your interest lies, but you have some directional sense, being the jack of all trades is the best thing you can do to yourself. Because then a bit of backend engineering, some data engineering, you can build a product from scratch. And again, this would have been my answers 2 years back. Today, you can do all of that. No question, there's no excuses. Like you can literally build a product from scratch. So my recommendation would be try out stuff, see what resonates, build prototypes, build product, host them on your GitHub. That will go a long way.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you very much. I feel like your insights are very valuable to all of the college students here, particularly with how fast things are changing and the emphasis a little bit less on the technical skills. To round out our fireside chat, I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you, specific to data engineering. Just give a quick answer, top of your mind, whatever shows up. SQL or Python, which runs your life?
Wow.
See, that would have been different 2 years ago as well. Messy data, is it expected or is it a personal insult?
I thought you were going to say Messi or Ronaldo.
Oh.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Messy data, is it expected or is it a personal insult?
I think it's a bit of both. If someone calls it out, it is a ding. So if it's a ding, then people do question that. So a bit of a personal insult as well, but I try to make it happen.
Okay. Batch or streaming, what's less stressful?
Oh, definitely batch.
Okay.
Streaming gives you no room for change.
Okay. Got it. One pipeline failure horror story.
True story, wrong data, executive dashboard had to hard code for a presentation.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully that worked out well.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh shit. It's going to be very controversial. I was a Ronaldo fan, but I think Messi's better.
okay. Okay. I actually agree with that one. But yeah. Um, couple last ones. Dashboards or raw tables? What do you trust more?
Raw tables, trust, but dashboards are the product. So that's what the leadership trusts.
Got you. And final question, what is something that keeps data engineers up at night?
Oh man, failures on call, typical engineering stuff. If a metric goes wrong uh, at night, you're not going to sleep.
Makes sense. All right, everybody. That does bring me back to the end of the set of questions I have for Prateek's fireside chat. Can we have a please round of applause for Prateek and his insights today?
I'll just say one thing here. I've attended these when I was in grad school as well, and a lot of times I used to walk out a little. I was like, sounded philosophical. So my goal is always to give you accurate insights. Some of it sounds philosophical because it's for the longer term, but I always try to do my best to give you kind of like more short-term actionable items, and I'll try to focus that in my presentation as well. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Prateek is also going to be leading our next workshop at 2:30, so make sure to tune in for that as well. And he'll be around here for sure for networking. Any questions you have, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. But yeah, thank you everybody for being here and joining our fireside chat. Happy hacking.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, it did? No, it's still up.
But it's like out of focus for some
It's
reason.
been like this for a
Yeah, I
while.